Hi, welcome to Plaistow Cable TV, Channel 17. We have our election coming up again. It's that time of year, March 11th, and we have 5 candidates running for selectmen. We have 2 spaces available, and we have 4 of the 5 candidates are here with us today, and we're going to have a chance to talk to them. The candidates that we have here with us today are, we have Bob Gray, and Bob Gray is a current selectman. He's actually the current chair of the Board of Selectmen, and he's served 1 term for us already. We also have Martha Sumner. Martha Sumner is also on the Board of Selectmen. She's in her first term. She was elected 1 year ago to fill a position that was vacated by a member of the board that had to resign for personal reasons. We also have Larry Gill running, and Larry Gill's a former 2-term selectman. Larry was selected for 2 terms, and he's also served on the conservation commissions, committees. He's been involved with planning. He's a biologist, and he's been involved with a lot of town committees over the years. We also have with us tonight Steve Curran, and Steve has lived in Plaistow for just almost 10 years, maybe 8 years. He's married. He lives over in Kelly Road, over near the Beatty Waste site, and he's particularly interested in some of the issues that have affected that site. And we also have another candidate is Bob Toomer, and Bob is a 77-year-old gentleman that's a senior citizen here in town. He's lived in town for the past 10 years. Prior to that, he was in Salem for about 35 years. He has 3 children, a daughter that lives up in Plymouth, a son in Londonderry, and another son over in Methuen. His issues are primarily concerning senior citizens issues. He's also, his background was working for Hazardous Waste Company, so he feels he could bring some practical experience to the table on that issue. And he thinks generally that the taxes and the tax structure in town are higher than what the average senior citizen can pay, and he wants to address those issues. Bob wanted me to tell you that he's not going to put up any signs this year because he's a senior citizen and he lives on a Social Security check, and he doesn't believe in spending money that he doesn't have, and he thinks the town should do the same. So we'll start off today with some of the issues. Sometimes we have some real controversial issues, and sometimes we don't. This is a year where things are running a little bit smoother in the town, so but there are always some issues to talk about. So we thought we'd start off talking about what's going on in the fire department. I thought we'd start with Larry, and there was an issue with that went through the budget committee, and selectmen and the budget committee had different opinions on funding a position that's a full-time position, another full-time position for the fire department, and that would be kind of an administrative assistant position. I'm wondering what your thoughts might be on how you think the fire department is moving.
I think in light of the current financial situation, I think the town needs to really evaluate whether or not it needs to do that at this point. I believe that Chief McCardle has probably looked at this and made some decisions and feels that it's necessary. I think in concert with the budget committee and the selectmen, I think they have to come to that same conclusion. It does not seem to me, viewing it from the outside, that that's a necessary step at this point. I think the evaluation should be based on what can the town afford at this time, and is it a proven choice at this time.
Great. Martha, do you have any thoughts on how we're moving along with the fire department?
Well, originally the fire department had come in and they were looking for a full-time firefighter and a full-time assistant. Mm-hmm. And the full-time fire department, a firefighter, I'm sorry, we did not approve at the selectmen level, so that basically was dropped. But the assistant they're looking for is a part-time position. It's a 32-hour a week. Mm-hmm. So it was full-time. We got it down to part-time. I feel that if the fire department is growing and the chief feels that we need this, it's something that, we at least should give it to let the voters have the option of approving it or not. Okay. And that's where it is now.
Now, Bob, is that position, in the budget, or is it a warrant article? Some people have asked me that issue. Is there a warrant article for this position, or is it in the budget
Yes,
already?
there's a warrant article for the position.
Okay.
And I believe that it's a necessary position only because the choices that you have to make when you become a selectman is that the person, there's a certain amount of paperwork that has to be filed, and the information that the selectmen get from the fire chief is that anytime that there's an incident that happens in the town, he's responsible for going back and filing paperwork, and that's mandated through the federal government. It's not mandated through the state. The state can't do it because the state has an unfunded mandate law. But he's got to go back and do that. So the question you got to ask yourself is, do you want to take the fire chief off of the road and off from helping people off the street to take care of that paperwork, or would you rather hire somebody at a part-time at a lower rate than what we're paying that fire chief to bring him in and do that paperwork for him? The other interesting thing is that the chief has also told the selectmen that there is a possibility that that administrative assistant could be certified as an EMT also and basically do double duties. And so when there's not a lot of paperwork, that person would be doing something also.
So you think the person would bring more to the table than just paperwork? If they were an EMT, they'd be...
Right. I think there's a way that we can get it to be so that that person is just not somebody who answers the phones at the fire station. And just one correction, there was no disagreement on that position between the budget committee and the selectmen. We both voted. The disagreement was with the recreation director, which we'll talk about later.
Okay, great. Steve, do you have any thoughts on how the fire department is moving forward to the next millennium?
Regarding this part-time position?
Yeah, regarding this position, or...
I don't really feel the fire chief should be handling all the administrative, the filing duties. And from what I've read, those duties are going to be increasing in the future. So I believe it should be on the warrant for the voters to decide if the fire chief should get an assistant or not. But from what I've read, he might need that in the future. And if it is an EMT, that would be a good compromise.
Great. Martha, do you think the makeup of communities are changing? And I've seen this in other communities too, where I think that it's getting harder to get volunteers. I mean, do you think we have a volunteer fire department down the road?
Well, I would hope that we could. I actually started out in the paper. They're looking to start the Explorers again to try to get a second, generation of volunteers. We would hope that we could keep that. But what you see with communities, Hampstead's looking for, I believe, 4 full-time firefighters this year. I've seen a lot of even towns in Massachusetts who have had volunteers are now looking for full-time departments. So I mean, we really are ahead of the game with the 3 full-timers that we have. But I would hope that we could stay as we are, but with the way this town's growing, I don't know if that's going to be a possibility. We might need to add 1 or 2 full-time firefighters.
Larry, when you were selectman, it wasn't that long ago, but we were really just volunteers. I mean, do you think that the makeup of not just our community, but community in general are changing so that we're getting away from some of that?
Absolutely. I don't think you have the localized workforce that you'd had back, say, 10 years ago, or even earlier than that. You've got a lot more commuters, and so that you don't really have a workforce that you can readily draw upon, at least in additional people. I mean, I think most of the people that are volunteers now probably do work reasonably close by, but I don't see that where you're getting a lot of new blood into doing that for a variety of reasons, most of which is there's not a lot of young people around here to fill those kind of positions. So, yeah, there's been quite a bit of change in this town and elsewhere for volunteer services.
Bob, this kind of brings us into a segue of volunteerism. When you have issues like makeups of fire departments changing because people just don't work in the community like they did before and they're not able to be on call, is what's going on in town with this conflict of interest committee, and people talk about we're kind of blocking those volunteers out, with talking about conflict of interest. And I know no one's in favor of conflicts or conflict of interest, but do you think that sometimes when we try to do things so there aren't conflicts, do we actually block people out from being volunteers?
Well, I think there's a difference between a conflict of interest for an elected official and a conflict of interest for an employee. The current conflict of interest ordinance as it stands today, does not affect the employees of the town. It doesn't affect them at all. It only affects the elected people who run to serve on different committees in the town. I think you're right, though, that Plaistow is not unique. It's following basically what every other town in southern New Hampshire is following, in the fact that Larry's absolutely right. The workforce, we just don't have the base in the town to have a volunteer fire force anymore. However, there is a certain amount of planning that you can do, and I've talked to the chief and the town manager about this. I think you need to look at the people, the 40 people that we have as volunteer firefighters, and you need to make an assessment of when they could possibly be getting done or when they think they might be getting done, so that you can look at your explorers and your other organizations to get people to replace them, because it takes a certain amount of time to train a firefighter and an EMT. And so I think that's all part of the planning process, and the town needs to have something like that in place, which we work on diligently, but we have to have that in place in order to move forward.
Steve, I've heard radio ads for other communities. I've heard one for Newcastle, where they had a radio ad looking for volunteers to sign up to be part of the volunteer fire department. Do you think as a town we're doing enough to get people to participate and volunteer, not just for the fire department, but for other committees? Because you've just gotten very much involved in town issues relatively recently, and do you think, were you welcomed into that, or do you think it was hard to get involved?
Oh, I was welcomed into the process. I haven't heard any of those ads that you mentioned, but I don't have enough information to give you a good answer on whether or not we're trying to recruit volunteers or not.
Okay.
But I tend to think that we're moving away from a volunteer fire department. Just like Larry was saying, the way the community is growing and people are commuting, there's just not enough people locally to take care of that need.
Great. Martha, another issue that's near and dear to you is recreational, the recreational committee, and what's happened in the rec department. I know I've heard people talk about the rec department not being, traditionally we think of rec department as softball, little league, soccer, but I guess it's more than that, and it's evolved to that. And there's an issue this time up again that we've had before about how we're going to head that department up, and do we want a full-time person, do we want a part-time person, what level of commitment are we willing to make? And what are your thoughts on the rec department?
Well, we have a brand new director. She's been with us since August. She holds a master's in recreation. We were thrilled to have her come on board. The position had been a 32-hour-a-week position. We increased it at deliberate session up to 40 hours. The selectmen were in favor of it, and the budget committee were not in favor of it. But the rec department has grown. I mean, they're looking, I know the director is working with Elderly Affairs. She's on that committee. She's on the Old Home Day committee. She's planning community trips to Blue Man Group. She's looking to expand to be able to include the elderly, middle-aged, children, so everyone will be involved in recreation in the town. And it's not just sports and baseball like most people.
Right?
That's right, like most people think. And we are still looking forward to the project on Old County Road that has passed all the approvals on the state level, and we're looking to see that. Hopefully, if we can get on there and get moving in spring, they'll be playing on that in the fall.
Really?
So.
Bob, on the rec department, do you see does the town have to put more money? Are we going to have to raise more money when we get those fields open to supervise them, to maintain them, or is that, do you think it's money well spent, or?
Yes, I mean, it's hard to argue the fact when you have nothing or you have something. When you have nothing, which is what Plaistow has for fields right now, you know, you got to logically conclude that it is going to cost some amount of money to maintain those fields, whether it be cutting the grass or just general maintenance, or. But to answer the question on the rec director, the budget committee did not feel that it warranted having a full-time director at this time. The selectmen voted in favor of that increase, and so there was that conflict. And the deliberative session hashed that out, and they put the money back into the budget. So the budget that you will see when you vote on March 11th will be having a full-time recreation director for the town of Plaistow. And I am in support of that, and hopefully, like Martha said, that the program will continue to grow in a positive direction in the future.
Steve, do you think that's money well spent? These are tough economic times, and some people might think it's money well spent, and some people might think it's not. What are your thoughts on, continuing to fund and expand the rec department?
Well, I believe the rec department is an important part of the town. We don't have a lot of land right now, and there is a lot of plans in the works for expanding at least some fields. I know the Old County Road is just a matter of time, but also the BD waste site could be possibly some rec fields. So I believe having a full-time director is probably a good idea, especially since there's going to be a lot of growth in that department.
Larry, what are your thoughts about the rec department? Do you think it's going in the right direction? Are we spending our money wisely, or?
I think it's going in the right direction, and that it's broadening its base and its interests to, as Martha was talking about, to extend beyond sports into other issues. And so from a community standpoint, it's a really good thing. The issues still come down to the people's choices as to what they want to do. A lot of discussion has been made, well, government is growing. Well, government grows in response to the demands of the people. I don't see it as government expanding just for expansion's sake. It expands in response to the issues before the people. And so we have a basic conflict at this point, where you do not have an economy that is doing well. You do not have the resources, certainly for most of the communities, economic resources coming in. So you have to make some choices. If the people's choice is, we want to see this program, then so be it. But then you have to pay for it, and you have the responsibilities that go with that in terms of expanding the program. My thinking is that there are times for this. I don't know that it's really right now. I think the idea that Bob was expanding on in terms of the assistant to the fire department taking on additional duties is what you'd have to do in the situation for the recreational director, getting involved and doing some other things for that, if it's going to be 40 hours, so that they are broadening the assistance to the town, not strictly in terms of just a recreation.
When you look at who we have running this time, it's interesting. It kind of tells about what the issue might be in the campaign this year. The three challengers that we have are a biologist that has interest in conservation and planning. We have somebody who lives over on Kelly Road that has a very specific interest in those issues. And we have a guy that, Bob Toombs, who's not here tonight, who has retired and had worked for a company that cleaned up hazardous waste. So I think when you see the three challengers that are running against two incumbents, or running with the two incumbents, you might see that the issue this time might be the BD waste site and what we're going to do with that site. This is an issue that's in front of the town now, how we're going to continue that cleanup, and where we go from here. And Bob, I thought we'd start off with you. And we've got to the point where it has been a Superfund site. I think the townspeople were pretty happy about that because we thought the funding would be there to clean it up. Mm-hmm. Where are we now?
Where are we now? Well, the town has a reuse committee on how we are going to look at that site in the future. And that committee is made up of selectmen, it's made up of the planning coordinator, it's made up of the chairman of the planning board and conservation commission. It's also made up by local citizens, 2 local citizens that live in that area as well, and the town manager. And coupled on top of that, we have people who work for the EPA and the State Department of Environmental Services, who have been working with us closely as well. The town's kind of on a 2-track system right now. On one track, you have the selectmen looking into taking over that site. There is a large tax lien on that site. It's $600,000 plus, and the selectmen need to look into taking that site only because the part of the federal government or EPA taking that site is that there has to be a controlling entity in that site. Whether the town controls it or the state controls it, somebody's going to have to control that site. So what's happening is EPA is going to be issuing a record of decision sometime this spring. And the record of decision is a document that says how the site is going to be cleaned up and what levels they're going to clean the site up to. And the town received a grant from the federal government of $99,000 so that we could hire a professional planner that works for the town of Plaistow, CMA out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And they are drawing up plans, and we're going through a process right now of having public hearings to engage on what that site should be best used for in the future. And as it stands as of today, we've narrowed that down to a few viable options. Some of them include elderly housing, some of them include recreation, fields, passive recreation, a community center, and there's a lot of negotiation involved because the PRPs, the potential responsible parties who are responsible for the cleanup, the cost of that cleanup, are going to have to pay for it. So the town is in negotiation with them and through EPA, and we have the state, and so there's a multi things going on right now. It's very interesting, though.
Okay. Martha, do you think when all is said and done, is it going to come back to the taxpayers in Plaistow to pay for this? Or, I mean, is there going to be a burden put on the Plaistow taxpayers as well?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, it's not going to, Plaistow has paid their share. We had a share that we had to pay to clean up because we were part of that. But depending on what goes out there, I mean, we have, like Bob said, one of the plans has recreation, has elderly housing, has a community center, all on that. I mean, I don't think so. I would think once it's clean and turned back, there might be, if there's recreation, there might be some cost to that, but that we're talking, 20 years probably down the road maybe with the recreation. But if we put housing out there, that's going to be a benefit to the town, especially elderly housing, because this town really does need something like that.
Great. Steve, there are different levels that a Superfund site can be cleaned to, and those are different standards. Are you familiar with that? So
Yes.
are there different, do you have any thoughts about that, with how you think it should be cleaned up?
Well, I'd like to see the site cleaned up, obviously, to the safest level, and that's some of the discussion we've had at these committee meetings that we've been going. I've been attending 3 of the meetings that have been taking place already, and it all depends on how the site is used, is how they're going to clean it up. So, from what the town and the people at the meetings have decided so far, as we said, we've discussed elderly housing. Those uses will require pretty much a full level of cleanup, since those needs they'll have to be wells dug, people will have to drink the water there, they'll have to dig foundations, so that soil and the area is going to have to be cleaned. So, and the EPA has said they will clean it up to a safe level.
Well, you're from the neighborhood, so
Yes.
you probably have as vested interest as anybody. Are you satisfied with the way it's been going?
So far, yeah. There's been some frustration along the way. It's just mostly a learning process. Originally, when I heard the site was on the Superfund, I assumed that the federal government was going to clean it up and everything would be done. But as time has gone on and I've done a lot more research, it just turns out there's a lot more involved in that, including the PRPs. So it is a lot more involved than what I originally thought.
Hey, Larry, I know you'd like to be at the table when we're negotiating how this is going to be cleaned up and what the future of it is. What would you bring to the table?
Well, some experience in dealing with it. I mean, I think one of the things I was most proud of during my tenure as a selectman was establishing it as a Superfund site. There was a lot of resistance at the time because there's no question there's a stigma associated with a property and to some degree a town when you have a Superfund site. But I think wiser heads prevailed in that if you really wanted to see that cleaned up, there was only one way that was going to be cleaned up, and that was through the federal government taking jurisdiction over that property and assuring the cleanup. What has changed, as Steve has pointed out, is that now the PRPs have more of a role in the cleanup, and that they have some say, and that they're going to be putting up the money. And so the issue has to be how you successfully negotiate with the PRPs for that level of cleanup. A couple of weeks ago, we had basically an all-day session, the morning session being primarily the residents listening to CMA make a series of presentations about possible alternatives, which have been mentioned already. The afternoon was with the PRPs, and they have a very different view of how this should be done. They say all the right things in terms of, yes, we'd like to see it cleaned up and we want to be protective, primarily because they do not want to be subject to any liability later on. What comes up, the issue is that level of cleanup and the amount of dollars that they will have to put up for that. So they were not too receptive to the ideas of a full level of cleanup in the sense that you might have people living on the site. But I think, again, there's some negotiations that can be done. There are some alternatives about how that can be done if the town decides that. And I believe that the higher level of standard allows the town the most flexibility and also provides, in the long run, the PRPs the best chance of not having to deal with any liability issues in the future.
I don't know if anybody's noticed this year, but there's been a lot of snow. And it's been pretty tough for all the communities in our area. And I just thought we'd touch base on the highway department. My street, Martha, has been clean. It's been unbelievably clean.
That's good to hear.
Real quick. What are you hearing from around the town, and how do we stand on, is there a budget anymore?
Well, we haven't had a meeting since the last storm, so I'm not 100% sure if we still have a budget, but we did increase the budget by $20,000 at deliberate session, and that was before we had the last two storms. So I honestly don't know what we have, if we have anything left. We didn't meet this Monday night because of the holiday. We hadn't had a meeting scheduled, and we probably would have canceled because of the storm. But you know, it's good to hear that the streets are clean. I know Danny's doing a great job. That Christmas storm, I think him and his crew worked like 90 hours before they got off. But they've been working really hard. I mean, we weren't expecting this, but we will see what we have left and go forward. If that means maybe cutting something out of the budget towards the end of the year so we have some money left for next fall and early winter, we might have to do that when it comes to, you know, paving some streets.
Bob, how are you getting any calls, or is everybody as happy as I am? Maybe I won't be happy when I get my tax bill, but I'm happy right now with the snow gone.
Well, I think you'll be happy from the town's portion with your tax bill. I don't know about the whole tax bill. In general, yes, people are very happy with our highway department, and Danny is doing a phenomenal job under the worst conditions that we've seen since I've lived in town, which has been 12 years. There are people that, you know, they're not going to be happy no matter what happens in the town. And, you know, I just so happened I was at Town Hall today doing the dedication of the town report. We went to George and Ellie Peabody, by the way.
Oh, great.
And I was answering the phones, and I picked up the phone, and somebody was cursing and complaining because the wingback had gone and pushed snow back into their driveway and covered up their mailbox again. And so, you know, it's going to happen. We have a lot of snow. The first storm, I call it the New Year's storm, cost the town $22,000. And if this storm, just by history, you know, this storm, it fell on a holiday, and the amount of money that we're going to have to pay to have people out on a holiday cleaning snow up, it's going to cost at least that amount of money. So Martha is exactly right. I mean, the right thing to do was to appropriate more money at delivery session. We got that passed. It's in the budget. You'll be voting for it on March 11th. But that money, that $20,000 that you spoke of, is gone. It doesn't exist anymore because we just spent it in one snowfall. So. There's nothing you can do. I just would like to reassure the residents that there is plenty of money, and like she said, we may have to find money out of paving, but the streets will be plowed and essential services will continue.
Steve, do you have any thoughts on how the highway department's responded to the really been a snow crisis this year, too. Any thoughts on that, or should we do anything differently? Or?
It's definitely been a tough year. It has been quite a few years since we've seen snow like this, but generally I've had no problems. I think the town's done a great job with the cleanup, especially with what they've had to, all the snow they've had to work with. I've been in other towns. For my job, I drive all over the place, and some of the roads out there are horrible.
Right.
I mean, very narrow and just tough to drive down, but I haven't had that problem in town at all.
Great. Larry, do you have any thoughts on that, how it's going with the highway department, and compare it to maybe when you were selectman?
I think it's going extremely well. We had Kenny Crowell that preceded Danny Garlington, and I think Danny learned a lot from Ken during his tenure there. And I think the roads are really as good as you could possibly expect, given the level of storms and the amount of snow. Yeah, there are going to be situations, as Bob talked about, with the irate citizen where they get shoveled in again. I think you have to give everybody a little bit of slack. There is a lot of snow. There has to go someplace. And really what's being done is for the benefit of everybody and the safety of everybody. And sometimes that is going to inconvenience the individual homeowners, but it's something you got to put up with, and that's why you live in New England. This comes with the territory.
Bob, I thought we'd touch on the future of Plaistow a little bit, and I know that that's a real issue for you. I noticed that at Old Home Days, you were the Grand Marshal of the Children's Parade. So the future of Plaistow is an issue that you're very concerned about. How do you see things happening in the future? I know people are always talking about what's going to happen to 125, and there's a lot of things, discussions about the future of 125, and some of the business people in town have talked to me about that, and there's some concerns about the widening of 125. Do you know about that, or just touch base on it briefly?
Well, I know a little bit about it. The couple of things on 125. The town is working with Haverhill to look at the intersection of 125 and 121A. We have like a 50-50 cost grant split with them to analyze that intersection, to look at what we need to do. And I know that's a bone of contention. It's been a bone of contention of mine since for 10 years since I've been on the planning board. But in terms of the widening of 125, it is on the 10-year state transportation plan. It's work that's scheduled to be done. I do believe it's 2006, but I might be wrong about that. But part of the plans, as I understand them today, is to eliminate some of the curb cuts along Route 125, which could upset a lot of business owners, and to put an access road behind where the businesses are located on the eastern portion of 125. And it's a plan that I've only briefly seen posted in the Selectmen's office. I don't know much about it. I haven't had a chance to ask the state any questions about it. But they're talking about putting a median in 125 and basically making it a direct road besides the traffic lights that are along the road now. So there's a lot of opposition to it, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming down the road.
Martha, how do you see the future of Plaistow? I remember when Carol and I first moved here to Plaistow on 125, there was just a pine tree gift shop and not much else. What do you see if we were to look down 125 in 20 years?
Well, I hope to see pretty much the way we see it now without more growth, because I remember driving up here in the 60s when there wasn't much on 125 either. It's a small town, and we still like to keep that small town flavor. I mean, 125 is our commercial out here, and we do need some improvements out there. There's a lot of accidents that happen out there. I agree with Bob with 121 and 125. Definitely, we need to do something with that intersection. I very rarely drive that intersection out there because it's so hard to get out. We make some changes, but I would hope that we don't see too much more growth, that we really be able to stay on a keel where we are and just maintain what we have.
Larry, do you think we've lost control of that growth already? Is there anything that you can do now to maybe to reel it back in, or is there a way that we can put a couple more used car lots on 125?
I think the town, through the planning board, can have a vision as to what 125 they would like it to look like. But the economic pressures are what really drive it. If you have a large developer, and talk about Home Depot, et cetera, coming in, I mean, that drives a lot of the decision-making that's the town is going to have to make because of the tax situation. I think what the town wants to do, in my opinion, in terms of maintaining that growth, is to have sound planning with it. Make this road and make those properties look well and function well. The town, the Conservation Commission looked to, back several years ago, to limit the amount of impervious parking lot just because of the generating stormwater, generating pollutants coming off the cars and off the pavement. I think the town really needs to continue to look at that so that these properties, as they are developed, have some appeal both visually and also from an economic standpoint.
Great. Steve, do you have any thoughts for like a master plan or how the town's going to grow in the future?
Talking about 125, it is a big commercial zone and it is a popular part of town. A lot of people do come up from here to other towns, so definitely controlled growth is needed. I mean, you just start throwing a lot more businesses out there, it's going to be very difficult. Just trying to drive on 125 on the weekends is going to be very dangerous. So definitely keeping in mind the improvements do need
to happen, but we do have to work with Haverhill on that as well. And I'm sure that's not an easy thing to do, working between two states. So.
Great. You know, it's interesting because the people that are running this time are all very cordial. There's not really any real controversy or any issues that are that become personal. And you see that in some of the elections, and that's not what's happened in Plaistow. It's not what's happened in Plaistow in the last few cycles. And I think some of that comes from the way the selectmen conduct themselves in town. I think it kind of sets a tone. And what do you think about that, Bob? Do you think the selectmen have set a tone of people working together in the last few years since you've been on the board? Or?
Yeah, I do actually. I think when you talk to the public, they sense that also, and they've told me that they sense it. Listen, I've said all along, it's what's happening in town government. It's not just what's happening. It's how people perceive things happening in town government, and people perceive that things have gotten better, and therefore they're going to come out and say, yeah, I think things are better. Mm-hmm. The tone of town government, I think, has changed. We work together. It's all right to disagree, and even the selectmen do disagree with one another sometimes. But you know what? We vote on it and we move on. You know, the vote is what it is. The majority rules, and we move on with whatever the issues are that are facing the town.
Right. Martha, you've only been on 1 year, and I noticed when I watched the selectmen's meetings on TV, you're smiling. You seem happy. Was it a good move for you to get involved? And
it is. It's been a good year, and I hope that I've done what I said I was going to do, and did a good job, and the voters believe in me. And I agree with Bob. We agree to disagree. There are nights that we don't all agree on the issues, but we discuss it, and if we don't agree, we vote, we move on, and we go to and there's no backstabbing, there's no we're cordial. We need to work together, and I think with the town manager, we have the 6 of us have a great working relationship. Right. And we do what needs to be done.
Larry, you've done this 2 terms in the past, and it's a lot of work, a lot of nights, and people say that Larry Gill's probably one of the more pensive selectmen we've had in the past, pragmatic. Is that what you think you'd bring, or do you think there's anything that needs to be changed with the way the selectmen are conducting business in general?
Well, I thank you for that accolade. I think that's really what I tried to bring when I was selectman, is ability to listen to everybody and let people have their say, and then do what I think is in the town's best interest. Previous years, you just had some very, very strong personalities on the board. You also had people that had some long-time antagonisms that were there. So There is no question that the board right now seems to have is a lot more cordial to each other. There were just some real antagonisms on previous boards, and that makes it difficult to deal with. And what I try to do, and what I would like to bring in the future, is that ability to listen and do what is best for the town.
Steve, when you're getting involved in some of the issues that have been, really driving you, the BD waste site, and you've dealt with the selectmen, have you found that there's a good working relationship with the town manager and the selectmen, and do you think there's anything that needs to be changed, or do you think you could fit into that and work with them?
I think I could fit into it. From my experience so far, I have been dealing with the town manager and members of the reuse committee, which members of the board are on, and they've been very receptive of suggestions and information. So, from what I've seen, I have no problem with members of the board right now. I usually do watch the meetings Monday night, and they do seem rather cordial. I don't know a lot of the past. I guess there was some problems, but from what I've seen lately, it seems to be professional.
Great. I thought what we did now is give everybody a chance to just talk about why you want to be selectman, what you think you're going to bring to the table, and just let everybody know that why you want them to come out and vote for you. So I thought we'd start right off with you, Larry, and just give the little bit of speech about
Sure.
why people should come out and vote for you. Remember, Larry was a two-term selectman, lives in town, married, you have 2 kids in school now,
Yeah.
and why don't you fill in the rest?
I must say that the 6 years that while I was selectman, I really enjoyed it. I liked the challenge of it. I liked dealing with the variety of problems that faced the selectmen. It was something that I really hadn't had a chance to experience before. I really got involved in it because of the BD waste oil site, and to some degree that's my interest now. My background has been in environmental management for a bunch of years with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and been on the Conservation Commission for better part of 20 years. And the town has really been it's been a good home to us. And one of the things I believe that as a citizen, you owe it to yourself and to your town to put some time in. It doesn't necessarily have to be in an elected position. It can be in a volunteer position. But it gives you, an insight into the issues that are before the townspeople, that are people that have to make those decisions, and 2, it also gives you some credibility when you complain about it, because now you're involved in it, and you can see both sides, and you're involved in making some of those decisions and living by those decisions. What I think I will bring to the board is somebody who will do his homework, has a strong love of this town. It's been really a good home for us, and I will let people have their say, and I will make my decisions in what I feel is in their best interest, and I would hope they will vote for me come March 11th.
Great. Martha, a lot of people know that you're a selectman now, that you ran last time and won this one-year term, and that you've been involved with the rec committee, but you're also married, you have 2 children that grew up in town, really went through the school system in town, and you bring a financial background to the position too. You're an officer in a bank, isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
What else?
As Larry, I have to echo what Larry said. I love the town. It's a great town. We've been in town for 15 years now. We've been living here in town. And I just got involved when my children were young, and it's something that I just felt that I needed to do, and I wanted to serve the community and do what I could. I think I've had a good year on the board. I think I've helped make some good decisions, and I hope that I'll be back again and serve for another 3 years. It is a big job. It is a lot of work. It's a big commitment, but I like doing it, and I will listen to what people say, and I have some phone calls at home, and I always bring back to the board what people have told me. And whether I win or lose, I'll still be involved in the town. I'm going to still be here. I'll still be doing recreation and doing anything that I can to make Plaistow a better place.
Right. Bob, you ran a couple of times. You were in one of the more historic election battles that we ever had. It was one time you lost by a flip of a coin, didn't you?
Right.
That was pretty exciting stuff.
Well, it was exciting for the opponent. Exciting for me.
But you know, I think that you know, your involvement has been pretty extensive. Even the times when you ran and you lost, a lot of times people would, if they lost an election, they walk away. But I mean, you stayed involved. You got involved with the committees, and I think people need to know that about you.
Right. Well, listen, I've lived in town for 12 years, and I came home from college, and I decided to get involved. I have a degree in government, so that probably what spawned me to initially get involved. And I ran for selectman right out of the block, and that didn't work out the first time, so I got involved with the planning board, and I spent 7 years as a member of the planning board, serving 1 year as chairman and 2 years as vice chairman. And after that, I won. I was involved in those elections where you said. I actually was involved in 2 very close elections. One of them did end up in the flip of a coin, which I lost that election.
Did you call heads or tails in that one, Bob?
I don't think I called anything because, as I remember, what happened exactly was that that night my mother was hit by a car in front of Town Hall. So it was a matter of running in. Actually, I think it was Larry who flipped the coin. Larry flipped the coin, and I was off to the hospital. I was out of there. So it wasn't really much of a night for me to get excited or not get excited or anything. But in 2000, I ran again, and I promised certain things that were going to be done. I said certain things needed to be done, and everything that I said that needed to be done, I've accomplished in 3 years. And I think there's some things that are coming up in the future that the town, that as a selectman, the town needs to be aware of. The first thing, of course, is the selectmen are, of course, responsible for watching the bottom line of the budget and not overspending money. And that will continue to be an issue going into the future. I think the second big issue that the selectmen will face in the future is we are going to have to renegotiate a waste management contract, and that's coming up this coming year, and it's going to be very, very expensive. It's the trash collection in the town is the second highest budget. It's bigger than the fire department's budget. It's bigger than the 18 smaller budgets combined that we have in the town. It's going to be to continue to do the services that we provide now, that you expect now and you receive now. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to receive the same services in the future. So it's going to take the selectmen to educate the public on changes that may have to come in the way that we pick up trash or however we're going to do business in the future. But that's a big thing that's going to happen. And I think the third big thing is to try to get people to be involved with the town. And that continues to be an ongoing struggle, I think, that all selectmen will face and are facing now. And I hope to do something about that in my next 3 years.
Great. Steve, it's a lot easier to not get involved and to not to put your name out on the ballot and go out there and run. But you've chosen to do it, and sometimes it's a hard thing to do the first time out. But you've been involved with committees, you've had issues that you've become very knowledgeable on and really brought that to the table. What do you think? What do you think's going to happen this time, and why should people get out there and support you?
Well, the BD waste oil was the reason that I decided to run for selectman. I wanted to become more involved, and I felt running for town office would accomplish that goal. I am a newcomer to town politics, but sometimes that could be a good thing, a new face, some new blood in the system. I try to be a problem solver. I like to research problems. Other than that, it's hard to say.
You going to do any, put any signs up or do any of that?
I do have some signs on order. I'm not going to go crazy.
Okay.
You're not going to see my name all over the place, but...
Great. Well, I think that, you know, some years there aren't a lot of candidates, and some years there are a lot of candidates and not a lot of good candidates. This year, I think we really have a real good group of people to choose from. I think that we have 5 candidates. Bob Toombs isn't here tonight, is also running. But we have 5 good candidates. 3 of them have been selectmen before. One's a senior citizen. One is a person who's bringing a wealth of information on an issue that's very critical to Plaistow and the future of Plaistow. And I think that it's our job now to make sure we all come out and vote. March 11th is the election date. And these people are courageous enough to put their time and their personalities and who they are out on the line for you. And I think you really need to come out and vote. So it's March 11th, and no matter who you support, I think we've got a great group of candidates and good selectmen, and good luck to all of you. And we'll see you all on March 11th. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, well.